You can support us by subscribing. The Ukraine-Russia war reshaped the military, diplomatic and socio-economic balances all over the world. The countries of the world determined their ranks during this war and acted accordingly. In the process, Russian aggression left the Eastern European flank in danger. But the countries that provided military and financial support to Ukraine took critical security measures to prevent the spread of Russian aggressive policies. On the other hand, the war in Ukraine has especially affected the Donbas region at the moment. Both sides of the war are in dire need of military ammunition. Considering that on the Bakhmut front line of the Donetsk region use thousands of shells and dozens of missiles every day, it seems that the side that resists the most in this war will take the advantage. For this reason, military equipment is of vital importance in Ukraine's eastern front lines, where violent clashes occur. Tanks, armored infantry vehicles, defense systems, and many other military equipment are actually factors that change the course of clashes in both the city of Bakhmut and the other front lines in Ukraine. The reason for this is that the side that constantly updates the inventory of its army can now carry out much more effective attacks. The simultaneous offensives against the Russians in both the Luhansk and Donetsk regions by Ukrainian forces this week is being effective, thanks to military and financial support from the United States and Western Europe. The USA, which sets an example to the world in this regard, is one of the countries that have provided assistance to the Ukrainian army so far. As you know, the US administration has provided a total of $30 billion in military aid to Ukraine. Thanks to these military aids, the Ukrainian armed forces were able to show much more resistance in the war. On the other hand, the Baltic states tried to support the Ukrainian army as much as they could. The gathering of all countries of the world under a single roof for a common purpose under the leadership of the USA in military aid showed us that despite this sad war, there is still hope for humanity. Ukraine, on the other hand, tried to continuously improve the inventory of its own army, in addition to these military aids. The Ukrainian armed forces, which broke new ground in the field of unmanned aerial vehicles, achieved significant success in the struggle for freedom. The Moscow administration constantly objected to the aid sent to the Ukrainian army from the Western Europe and accused Western Europe of escalating this war. The Russian opposition to the military aid sent to Ukraine in this fiercely ongoing war was actually a sign that the war was going in favor of Ukraine. No matter how much the Russians oppose military aid sent to Ukraine, the US Department of Defense has announced that the first batch of more than 60 M2A2 Bradley heavy armored infantry fighting vehicles has been sent to the Ukrainian army. With these vehicles reaching the Ukrainian army, the Russians were completely helpless, because there is now full tank and trench warfare in and around Bakhmut. Therefore, the advantage of clashes will mostly pass to the Ukrainian army, as the Ukrainian forces drive the M2A2 Bradleys to the Bakhmut and eastern front lines. In the Moscow administration, the striking decision of military aid came as a shock. The Moscow administration, especially unable to shake off the impact of the successes of the Ukrainian forces this week, has to find solutions against the use of the leader, Vladimir Putin, and now more than 60 M2A2 Bradley heavy armored infantry fighting vehicles in the Ukrainian army. In a press release, a US Army spokesperson said, "Bradley is a very powerful tool that we are providing to the Ukrainians. This will increase their ability to advance on the battlefield and reclaim lost ground, with equipment that matches or exceeds what the Russians have." The United States will send about 110 M2A2 Bradleys to Ukraine. Germany will send 40 Marder A1s, and Sweden will send about the same number of CV-90 infantry fighting vehicles. The vehicles will significantly assist Ukrainian forces in any oncoming counterattack, as they can quickly and safely transfer mechanized infantry close to the target. Also, according to the British Ministry of Defence, in the following days, the first Ukrainian tank crews to use the Challenger 2 main battle tanks arrived in the UK, and their training began. On the other hand, military equipment is already flowing into Ukraine, after the US signed an additional $3.5 billion military aid package for Ukraine last month. Soon, M1 Abrams tanks and German Leopards will also fall into Ukrainian hands. Yet despite its battlefield gains, Ukraine is depleting artillery and ammunition faster than foreign powers can replace it. This also affects the calculations of Russian President Vladimir Putin, who is waging a World War II-style war of attrition in the belief that he can surpass Ukraine. It could help the Biden administration and its European partners to build its own weapons. Build its own weapons factories to manufacture missiles and cannons, rather than the Kiev administration constantly knocking on doors in Washington and Europe when Ukraine's reserves are running low. Such factories, especially if defended with anti-aircraft and anti-missile systems, will not be more vulnerable than storage areas and transport vehicles that bring new shipments of weapons to and from Ukraine. This boost will shorten delivery times of required weapons to the front, enable dual defense bureaucracy, and give more focus on high-end platforms such as tanks and F-16s. It will also consolidate Ukraine's ability to defend itself wins the war. On the other hand, when defense experts in both Kiev and Washington were asked about the effectiveness of growing Ukraine's own defense industry, many in Ukraine focused on the need for tanks. Many in Washington are focusing on post-war, whether Ukraine will join NATO, and how this will integrate into the broader needs of the defense alliance. A modern defense industry could also help Ukraine repay its allies in a post-conflict future, as its factories could help replenish stocks already located in Northwest Europe. Putin may lose, but Putinism is deeply ingrained in the Russian psyche, and all Russian neighbors will continue to face the Russian threat for decades to come. Never again should Europe be as unprepared as it was on the road to the 2022 invasion by Russia. When Ukraine beats Russia, it will be the end of a violent episode, but not the end of the story. Rebuilding its infrastructure will cost Ukraine billions of dollars. Most of these funds will come from the donor community, and some should definitely come from Russian reparations. Still, Ukrainians will have to pay a large amount out of their own pocket, so any industrial enterprise will be worthwhile. Building and developing Ukraine's own defense industry can be an important component, not only on the backdrop of the current war, but also in a post-war future. On the other hand, although Russia had gains in eastern and southern Ukraine at the beginning of the war, these gains were lost one by one as of autumn. Ukraine's autumn offensive resulted in the recapture of 70% of the territories annexed by Russia in as little as 2 weeks. On top of that, seeing that the offensive capabilities of the Ukrainian army could carry the war deep into Russia proved that this invasion was nothing more than Russian propaganda, and that Russia could not prevail in this war, no matter what it did. On the Russian side, the consequences of this war will be even more severe in the future. Compared to Ukraine, the effects of the war could hit Russia much harder. Especially the economic and military effects may cause Russia to be in a worse condition than the former Soviet period. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications in order to be informed about new videos. Our contents are carefully prepared by our expert team. This content only belongs in Divine Justice YouTube channel. We will take legal action against all channels, social media platforms and websites who use our content without permission. Thank you for watching us.